Carried. Thank you. We now move to item 8, which is our regular emergency budget update, and I welcome Pramod and Nicola. Pramod will overall talk about our performance, and Nicola will talk about our savings. And if there is one Christmas present we leave you all with, which is our savings target of 95 million, record ever Auckland Council figure. Pramod, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, councillors. So as the Chair has introduced this item, Nicola and I will provide you with an update on how we're progressing against the emergency budget for the period up to the end of November 2020. There we go. So as per the slide that's shown above, there's two key items to update you on this month. It's firstly the group financial performance to the end of November, and the second one is the update on how we're progressing against the savings target of 120 million. The recommendations in the report are to receive the update on the progress on this for this financial year on the group financial performance, and noting the progress on the savings. As per the previous month, overall group financial performance remains on track with the emergency budget settings. We continue to see strong revenue performance, especially in the areas of regulatory and water care, revenue for IGCs and new connections. Regulatory volumes continue to exceed the expectations that were set in the emergency budget, with revenue tracking at 17 million above budget. With increased volumes, it does mean that there have been higher costs incurred to date as well, as a result of outsourced works required to cope with the additional volumes. Watercare have also indicated that they are closely monitoring their expenditure as well. In relation to drought response, they are seeing slight increases, but still manageable within the existing budget. Capital expenditure is still tracking below budget, but we are seeing some uplift with some of the strategic projects, especially around Auckland Transport, picking up pace. Projects such as Eastern Busway, Downtown and Matakana Link Road. Projects progressing probably quicker than is expected for this time of year. Although we've got some positive news on the revenue front, there still remains a number of risks that we need to keep an eye on going forward. As indicated last month, the asset recycling target, the timing of when that 244 million is achieved is likely to be post June 2021. There is a further update on asset recycling on this agenda, which will provide a more comprehensive update. Sorry, other items to note, as was indicated in the report, for the last 2 months, public transport patronage hasn't increased above the 65% mark when compared to the same period last year. So again, this will need to be monitored closely. Waka Kotahi indicate that at the end of December that public transport fare shortfalls will cease to be provided, which means that close monitoring of both revenue and expenditure budgets for Auckland Transport would be required as well. So those are the key updates. As mentioned in previous months as well, we'll continue to actively monitor performance. We've got end of December will mark the half-year reports as well, and when we come back in the new year, there'll be a more comprehensive update on how we're progressing against our financial targets. I'll just hand over to Nicola now to talk about the savings.
Thank you, Pramod. Nicola.
Thank you, Pramod. Good morning, everyone. So we have achieved another 8 million of savings in the month of November to bring us to a total of 95 million, which is 79% of our total target of 120 million. A couple of larger items of note in the month. So as at the PACE committee, you considered the Sport and Recreation Facilities Investment Fund for the year and the grants, and as a result of those grants having been made and the funding agreements agreed with the recipients, we now know how much cash will go out the door in this financial year, and there has been a further deferral of that fund. into future years. Also, we've been able to quantify the utilities cost savings from the August Alert Level 3 lockdown that we had that closed a lot of our community facilities. So we did save mainly electricity and gas utilities costs during that time. The other main thing during November was savings made through completion of some organisational structure changes, and one of the large ones there was a review of administration and business support services, which have been centralised to a large extent, and also there's been some removal of duplication of roles in those areas. I'm happy to take any questions, as is Pramod, on any of the on any of those items.
On performance or safety, and we have Councillor Hills, Councillor Cooper, Councillor Dalton. Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to comment, I just want to be careful when we're celebrating the savings when so many of those savings are staff being made redundant. My question is around that. So I have heard different things popping up around. At some point, comm staff and other staff were helping process consents because we'd let too many consent staff go, and then some of those staff who are processing those consents have been now made redundant and things like that. I've heard of lots of people being deployed in other places. Is there a look at what, I know we've got this envelope, but is there a look at the potential costs down the road that this, or other pressures that are putting on with the long-term redundancies, especially if we're locking them in for 2 years?
Thanks for your question, through the chair. So we last reported on redundancies at the 30th of September, and we will report on FTE again at the quarter end. But we had made only 23 employees redundant at that time, and because of, I guess, being able to foresee that there's a certain amount of change coming up, as roles have become vacant through resignations or retirements, they haven't been being filled. So we have been able to manage a lot of the staff reductions through that way as opposed to redundancies. So we'll be able to update further on that at the December half year. I haven't heard of that instance that you noted with comms staff processing consents, but I would note that through any changes in regulatory services staffing, they have not been reducing technical staff who process consents. There has been quite a lot of attrition, but that's a different problem.
It might have been related to when we had removed the contract staff at the beginning, but that's fine. The other question is around the asset recycling. Oh, first of all, how many cars are we got rid of? 64? Is it
In
high?
the report, Councillor.
Oh, sorry. But the comment on the asset recycling is I know we have different updates on that, but I am getting concerned. Is the staff concerned that we're not going to reach that target because we're so far off, or is it just because there's a lag in the process for processing those asset recycling numbers? Because I'm just worried what it means in a domino effect to other budgets if we don't get.
We're doing asset recycling, next item.
Yeah, but what it means to this budget, the savings have to dramatically grow quite suddenly if we don't get the asset sales over the line.
Through you, Chair. So the indication for the asset sales is more around timing, and I think the report indicates that maybe up till the end of the first quarter in the next financial year. There is a large pipeline of properties that Ross is working through. In terms of what that not meeting the target by the end of this financial year, what that means is that the overall picture needs to be looked at, both revenue, expenditure, rates postponement, the full picture. At this stage, in terms of how we're progressing, and if that target isn't met by 30th of June, there's probably no action required at this stage. And as we've been talking through the LTP conversations, with the proposal to increase our debt levels for the first 3 years for the LTP, there's less pressure to meet that 270 target by the end of June this financial year. So it shouldn't place additional pressure on needing to find more savings or additional revenue or anything like that.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you, Madam Chair. That was what I was nervous of. If we didn't meet it, that suddenly the business has to, by June, magically find. Yeah, so that's good to know that it's not just it's not a domino effect situation. It's a coming back to us.
I think you'll find that Ross will cover that in the next item, and if you've still got any concerns, he can answer that. Councillor Dalton.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an incredible job, and I know it's really, really difficult, and it's not going to get much easier for you, Patricia. I know we're only halfway through this financial year, and but we have identified $19 million of savings for the next financial year. So out of the current 95, how much will be carried over into the 90 million?
Through the chair, so as it stands at the 30th of November, 30 million of the 95 permanent savings.
It's pretty tough going, right?
Point 14, yeah. That's the number so far. Any other questions?
Are you taking questions and comments, or just questions?
I'll do questions first, if that's okay. All right. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. Mine was just a question around, I mean, it always sounds good, $17 million surplus in regulatory. My understanding is we don't factor in the corporate costs there, so that isn't as much of a surplus as you say. Can we just explain that and why we don't do that? Because we saw that in this budget, that we don't count that in, but it has to come out of what they've got. Office staff.
Just to clarify one thing, the 17 million isn't the surplus. It's how the revenue is tracking. So yeah.
On the way we don't account for corporate costs, and why we don't, because it is a cost to the unit.
Yeah. So through the chair, so as Pramod said, the 17 million he referred to was the revenue. There are increased costs in regulatory, which is why we've reported it as unfavourable. So while I guess, termed as surplus, it's really a contribution to overheads. And there are around 50 to 60 million of overheads that are attributable to the regulatory services that we include when we calculate the fees and charges for those services.
I just feel like it's not very transparent sometimes, especially when you do a big wash up at the end of the year and they go, oh, I've had this, but then you got to go, well, I'll take that away there because it's a contribution, and it sometimes not very obvious. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Casey.
It might be a question for Kevin or yourself, Madam Chair. I'm looking at the slide on group financial performance, and relates to the Ports of Auckland line, which says revenue on track, expenditure on track, and capital expenditure on track for the year to date. Can you just remind me, when did that report close off to make that assessment? And also, what's the leeway from moving between favourable, unfavourable and on track? Because I'd forgotten the process. And I must say I was quite, I'm quite concerned to see, or not concerned, I'm quite pleased to see that, but my heart says it shouldn't be because they're losing money. So can you just explain the gap, maybe in preparing the report and what's actually happening out there?
Yeah, through you, Chair, I can answer that question. So the first part is this report covers up the period up till the end of November, and so that assessment on whether performance is on track or not is for that period from July to November. In terms of how we decide whether the indicator is on track or not is looking at the percentage variance, as well as we do take into account whether it's a one-off or looking forward as well in terms of what the expectations are and forecasts. At this stage, for the indicator in this report is purely a financial one on how revenue, expenditure and capital expenditure is tracking against the expected emergency budget phasing for the period. And taking that into account, the result for ports to the end of November is in line with their budgets. The variance would be 1 to 2 million for each of those items for revenue, expenditure and CapEx.
At the end of November, the automation project was on track for the ports.
So again, through you, Chair, this isn't an update on how specific projects are tracking or where delivery of projects are at. It's purely a financial metric.
Kathy, Councillor, it's the budget that they had and the targets financially of income and costs, how they were tracking on that budget, not necessarily whether their projects were going good, bad or indifferent. I think that's more performance, but this is of the ports itself, but this is actually a financial report against budget, and that's the big difference, I think.
Yeah. And through you, Chair, the full group performance, which provides an update on how specific projects are tracking and the like, are provided through the quarterly updates, which are much more comprehensive and not just focused on the financials.
It's the one that you want to have a good look at. Okay, any comments then, Councillor Hills?
Oh, it's just maybe I didn't realise when I asked a question that Patricia had come up. Just a question, and I know I asked a lot during the emergency budget around staff well-being, but with the pressure over summer, are you working to ensure that staff actually have much of a break actually signed up? How can we be, a lot of businesses don't allow access to computers and things over summer, and I'm just worried with roles not filled, people doing extra. I've heard of emails coming through at 4 a.m. and different things like that. How can we ensure that there's a bit of a reset over summer that people get, you know, where they're not being pressured because of the budget to continue to work through that time?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Hills, because for certainly those of us in this room, we're all talking about hanging out till the end of the year when we can take a break, and that isn't so for all of our people. And in fact, for a lot of our people, things are going to get much busier and they will not have much of a break. So the executive leadership team have asked for some information from our general managers about where the pressure points are going to be over the summer. And off the top of my head, I know that it's going to be in some areas in active recreation, some areas in our community facilities, possibly in consenting, and there was one other area which is possibly libraries, yes, and finance. But we're going to get more detailed information because that won't be, you know, for every library or every pool. So we don't want to, you know, make sweeping generalisations. We're asking for quite specific information because we're very mindful of that summer peak and the additional pressure that it will put on some areas. So much of that is seasonal, and the good thing is that, you know, that doesn't last forever, but we will need to manage that when the demand is higher. We're very conscious of it.
But there is some way to flag people's acts, you know, that they are actually.
We have asked. We have asked specifically for general managers. We're not in a position to be able to do this in ELT because the pressure points are quite localised often. So we've asked for that information. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dalton.
Thank you, Chair. Look, it's similar to what Richard is speaking about, and perhaps for you, Patricia, or even Esther from governance. At the launch of the Central Interceptor yesterday, the Chair of the Water Care Board, Margaret Devlin, spoke about wellbeing of staff and how they are really caring about that. So they've partnered with Mates in Construction. I thought it mattered because it was governance taking an overt role in saying we're not worried, we're caring about the wellbeing of our staff. It's tough times and this is what we're doing. So I just wanted to address some of the concerns around the table. Is there a way that we can bridge that gap between governance and operations, around how we can have some certainty as to what we provide for our people, because things are going to get tougher, that is more than EAP, that we have some certainty. I mean, I know that we all care about our people. There's no dispute over that, but there is a gap between where we sit and what might be knowing what is going on. So I just wondered if there was a role that governors could take in ensuring that we are cognisant of what is around for our people as we continue to go through the savings, for one. So there'll be people leaving us, there'll be people left behind, and there'll be people under increasing pressure to both find the money and to perhaps do more than they usually do in their daily job. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Dalton, because the more that we can be joined up with you as governors in the area of well-being, so that we can speak with one voice about our care for the well-being of our staff, the better. And as management, we are very, very mindful of the well-being of our staff. It's been a particularly tough year. Since Jim has started with us, we have amped up our conversations around health, safety, and well-being, and you know, let's remember that health, safety, and well-being go together, and that it is not just about physical well-being; it is about mental well-being as well. And so we're very conscious that, you know, at the end of emails we can reel off the 0800 EAP number, and that, you know, sometimes that doesn't really get the traction that we need it to in terms of really speaking to the individuals who might need some help. So we're doing a lot more additional work with our people leaders on how they can support their staff, and on looking at particular areas where we need to provide more personalised support to teams in particular, and how we can make the support that's available more accessible. And it isn't just EAP, there are other forms of support as well. Jim had 3 conversations last week with people leaders, 2 separately with people leaders, and with 2 separately with our people, and we had over 2,000 people join in those conversations, so that we can keep the conversation live about how we as an organisation can best support the well-being of our staff and our people leaders.
Thank you. Just to frame that, it is around we're the ones signing off on the savings. So to be sure that we're okay with how everything is going for our people, not doubting a lack of care.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Councillor, because at the end of the day, yes, we've set the target and yet staff are there to meet it, but we want to have that confidence that they're meeting things that are reasonable and fair and have the best of all our organisation at heart when they do that. Councillor Mulholland, are you happy to second then? Are you? Thank you. Okay. Councillor Cooper, did you want to speak again?
Yeah, I know it's off topic, we've kind of got off topic, but it is around particularly West Wave over the summer, because there are massive queues. We've still got terrible maintenance problems and renewal problems that have been budgeted for years that haven't been done, and what that does is make people very angry, and our staff bear the brunt of it. So I just want, you know, when you're doing that, to be really looking at that, because we're so underpooled in the area. We have everybody queuing for hours, and things are breaking down as well, and different parts of it have been closed. So if you can just please, a plea for those staff there, they get a lot of flack with things that are out of their control, and I think we really need to be looking at getting on with maintaining it properly so it can be fully opened, and then we can at least meet some of the needs and our staff get less problems, less abuse. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Look, it's been moved and seconded. I'd like to put it to the vote then. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. And thank you very